All right, great. So, really quickly, Trina, would you like to go over our workshop goals?
Sure. We already did our introductions, but we're going to provide you with just a brief history of Chinook Fund and let you know about our grant making process, which is done through our core program called the Giving Project. Judith will go over in good detail our grant making criteria and explain what we do and do not fund, what we mean by community organizing. She'll give some really good information on the core grant making pieces that you're probably all here for. And then we'll also just give you some ideas of past grantees, what focus areas they have been funded for. And then Judith will also go through the grant application portal and really go into detail on how to fill out the application and help answer questions there. Excuse me. And then we should have time for Q&A at the end. And we'll also provide our contact information. So you can contact either of us afterwards if you would like some help or have some additional questions.
Awesome. And before we continue, I think that we have time, and I would love for folks to actually introduce themselves, not in the chat, but if you want to go on mic and just share your name, your pronouns, and a little bit about your organization, just to get to know you a little bit. So who would like to start? I'm seeing Miles on my screen, if you would like to go first.
Sure. My name is Miles Erickson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with Transformation Colorado, which helps trans and gender expansive young adults thrive in adulthood. And our eventual goal is to be a residential gap year program on a sustainable farm.
Thanks so much. Welcome. The next person on my screen, I'll just choose you, is Queen. Queen X.
Thank you. Just Queen. How are you? I am she, pronoun she, her. I'm located in Fort Collins, Larimer County. Queens Legacy Foundation has been in existence a little over 5 years. We support families navigate systems through knowledge. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Pass it on to Asatu.
Hey everyone, my name is Asetu Shango. I run Dark Goddess Collective, which is an organization that supports Black femmes in their creative endeavors. My pronouns are ze, zim, zir, or they, them, theirs.
Awesome, thank you. The next person I see on my screen is Erica.
Hi, Erica Ryder. I am the founder and owner of Hope Tank. For the past 11 years, we've used retail as a tool to connect folks to community work. We're now in a new space, focusing really on creative small business and providing really helpful resources, practical resources for creative small business owners, standing in the gap there.
Welcome, thank you. And then forgive me if I don't pronounce your name. Is it Darani Tang?
It's Darani. Hi, my name's Darani. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm with a newly formed organization, and we're a collective of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders working in focused on interracial and intercultural solidarity, and just focused on freeing, a world free of collective violence and focusing on healing collective trauma as well.
Thank you. Great. Let's see, I'm gonna call upon folks that are off camera, but if you can hear me, Jen, if you'd like to go next. Okay. We saw you come on video for a second and then But once you get a chance, if you'd like to introduce yourself, I'll go on now to Rika, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My camera is doing weird things and I can't turn it on. She, her, hers, ella pronouns, and I am the founder and executive director at Promotores de Esperanza. We provide a various variety of harm reduction services out in the community and DPS within DPS schools. We're located in Commerce City, Colorado. Fairly new organization. We've been doing the work for probably 3 years around overdose awareness and Narcan distribution, fentanyl test strip distribution, and really educating our communities about the dangers of street drugs. And so really helping to save lives and focusing on marginalized communities such as Spanish speaking, LGBTQ communities, among many others. And thank you for holding this workshop. Hi, Erica.
Great. I think I see Jen, would you like to go? I think you're back.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Sorry, I had to activate my microphone. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Power. My pronouns are she, her. I'm with PFLAG Denver. We're an organization that's been around nationally for 50 years, in Denver for 40, and we build allyship within and for the LGBTQ community, holding a lot of support groups and advocacy opportunities in the Denver metro area. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. And I think maybe the only person left, if I'm right, is it Arwen?
Yes, hi, my name is Arwen Eck. I'm the pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the founding director of the Holistic Homestead. We are a rural nonprofit dedicated to improving health and wellness in rural Colorado.
Great. Thank you all so much for introducing yourself. And hopefully you also get to learn about each other. And, you know, we're all based in Colorado, so it's great to know other partners in the field. So thank you all so much for introducing yourself. Now I'm going to pass it on to Trina to share a little bit about Chinook history in case you're not familiar with Chinook that much.
Thanks, Judith. So yeah, Chinook Fund has been around for, what is it, 35 years? Going on 36, or sorry, 36, going on 37. We were created in 1987 by a group of young people of wealth who wanted to use their resources to fund grassroots organizations working for social justice within their communities in Colorado. Chinook Fund became a part of a national network of sister funds supporting social justice community organizing around the country. Next slide, Judith. Whoops. Sorry, I'm looking at, okay. Can I get a volunteer, somebody to read out our mission here on the screen?
Chinook Fund supports grassroots organizations working on issues of social and economic justice. By pooling our collective resources, we seed groups making a positive systemic impact to improve the quality of life for all Coloradans.
Thank you, Queen. And yeah, thanks, Judith, for going ahead. And so now we're on to our values. Our values are liberation, community, excuse me, integrity, and leadership. So one way that our grant making differs from most funders is our community-based process, which happens through the Giving Project. This is our core program, and it brings together a diverse cohort of people who receive some political education and training on grassroots fundraising and democratic grant making. And then they raise resources from within their own communities and pull it together to create the funding for our grants. They also make the decisions on which groups will be funded through a democratic decision-making process. So it really is a community-based grant-making process. This upcoming spring cycle, which is this upcoming cycle of applications, we're using a slightly different process, which will be a grant-making committee consisting of Giving Project alumni, but it's the same community-based decision-making, democratic decision-making. And with that, I will pass it back over to Judith.
Great. So here's a quick overview of the 3 core criteria that we train volunteers to review applications. And so these are our guidelines. The first one is constituency led, which is work is led by people most impacted by the injustice. We believe that those affected by injustice have a vision and solutions for their own liberation. And community-wide, how we interpret that is think about intersectionality. Work reflects all members of the constituency and community, particularly those who experience multiple forms of oppression. And the last one is lasting effect, and how we as Chinook see that is that works that makes meaningful change for the community as a whole and future generations, not just one individual in the immediate future. So this is what we're going to be getting into in more in depth. And just some overall guidelines. Some successful applicants have had this in the past. You know, they're based in communities facing injustice or oppression. They have democratic leadership and decision-making that is led by and accountable to those directly impacted by the issue. They engage in dismantling privilege and oppression within their own organization and community, and also demonstrate that the work can lead to permanent progressive change to their community. And then we prioritize applicants who work in alliance and collaboration with other organizations. We know that a lot of our injustice are, you know, long-term and really entrenched, and we really need to collaborate and build coalitions, et cetera, to do this really hard work. Also, you know, our organization is strategic and working with a long-term vision with their work plans. You know, again, if you're an established organization, and we'll get to what is an established versus startup, but, you know, really seeing some concrete successes that have impacted the community. You know, organizations that see themselves as part of a larger social justice movement. Also work that has perhaps shifted paradigms or offers an alternative to existing institutions and systems that perpetuate injustice. Some applications, you know, have that, or like offer different models of the work that they're doing. Also, we support organizations that take risk by doing controversial or work that might be marginalized or is new or emerging. And also work that is evaluated to see, you know, again, just the lessons learned that you've had in this hard work. And what we do not fund are direct services to individuals, and we'll get into that a lot more, what we mean by that. We don't fund organizations that have a budget above $350,000. A lot of our organizations are either startups. We're really proud of that, of providing seed money to organizations that might be all volunteer led and are trying to, you know, establish themselves a little more. But that is our budget cap for organizations. We don't fund individuals or organizations controlled by one individual. And we'll get into that. For example, you know, we do ask to see who's on your board and what's the makeup of your organization. We don't fund scholarship requests, and that can look, you know, in different ways. But again, if your programming is, you know, a scholarship for different programming, we don't fund specific scholarship work. Also, we do not fund profit-making organizations, with exceptions to worker-owned cooperatives. So if you are a cooperative, you know, you can talk to me and we can talk about that. We also don't fund other foundations or pass-through funding. So for example, if, you know, your work really is like a funder, or, you know, you're raising money for other organizations, we don't fund that. It has to be the organization directly doing the work that needs to apply. We also don't fund organizations whose work or decision-making body is outside of the US. That's with an exception if you are a regional indigenous group, since we understand that we live in a, you know, society that has political borders and that might not honor the indigenous groups, you know, territorial lands. So we do make that exception. Also, we don't fund attempts to influence election of individuals to the public office. So any kind of C4 work that is really around getting a candidate into office, we don't fund that. And we don't fund direct union organizing, although we do support direct union organizing, but we don't support unions in that way since they have a membership dues model and it's just different from what we do. Is there any questions around the sections that I just covered? And feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll answer them as they come. Great. So now we're going to get into, again, these core criteria that we train the volunteers to review each application through. And we want to, share some of the questions that the volunteers ask themselves as they're reviewing an application. And these are the questions that we hope that you can pull out from, the work that you do so we can understand if it's present in your work. Again, you're all experts in the work that you're doing and your organizations and your mission and vision. So for us, it's just more around like, is there alignment to our core criteria? And then if you can help us, understand that from your organization. So can I have a volunteer to read this entire slide?
Yeah, I can. Work is led by the most impacted. How does the organization demonstrate their work is driven by the people it affects? Does leadership reflect the people most affected by an issue or oppression holding roles where they can shape the strategies in terms of their own liberation? Youth organizing. How is youth voice being incorporated into leadership? Is there a youth advisory board or other decision-making body?
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Miles. So again, this covers, and you can answer this question in different areas of the application. For example, you'll see there's different narrative areas where you could highlight that. But yeah, that is an important question. We really want to see work that is really rooted in the community, that is driven by the people that are impacted, that, again, their leadership and their voice is very integrated into the organization. And again, yeah, if you're working with youth, like understanding how organizations take their voices and, support their leadership in this process. And another volunteer to read this one, please.
Community-wide intersectionality. Does the organization work towards change that will affect all members of a constituency that are exploited, oppressed, or marginalized, taking into account those that face multiple oppressions? Is the organization working to build a multiracial, multi-class, multi-gendered social justice movement? Intersectionality versus diversity.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, and then just to highlight the quote by Audre Lorde, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And again, just a recognition to, again, the different experiences in, in our identities that we carry, and perhaps how injustice impacts those identities. So with intersectionality versus diversity, I think that what that refers to is around, we're not looking, for, applications or just kind of processes where maybe you have a diversity, right? Like you have a Latina here and you have a Black person here, and it's more like tokenized representation. Like we really want to see how, folks, how the issue is understood in a complex way, how, these multifaceted identities are supported. And it doesn't have to be like, that you have all this, constituency in your organization. It could be like how you collaborate, right? How you collaborate with another organization that is working on the same issue, but, it's impacted a little differently, right? That's kind of like how coalitions work. Like you might have your expertise area, but you recognize that there's other voices that need to be part of the table, to really address the issue fully. And then this one, please. And we get into some questions if people have some. Who would like to read it?
All right, lasting effect, upstream, systemic, strategic change. Will the proposed work help build concrete and lasting political power to address the underlying causes of the problems that it addresses? How does the organization define the root cause of the issue they are working to change?
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and again, I want to just mention too around like, we have startup organizations that might be getting their footing and like trying to, really identify, all of their work. So I think this lasting effect can look a lot of different ways. It could be, at many different levels. It could be as local as an apartment complex where, tenants are fighting to, get some rights from their landlord, or it could be as local as a school. But I think that what we're looking for is like, how is it changing like systems, right? Like, how is it changing that local environment beyond just like, helping one person? So again, this can look very many different ways. We would love to hear that, how you see that in your organization. And yeah, and I think again, really, understanding how the work that you're doing addresses the root cause, right, of that injustice that's happening in your community. Great. Well, before I continue, are there any questions around these core criteria? Because again, this is really the lens that, people's applications or organizations' applications are reviewed through. So this is an important part of our content. All right, well, I'll continue, and again, feel free if anything comes up. So those are the core criterias that, again, like I mentioned, that applications are reviewed through. And we also have 4 priority areas. And this is created, these priority areas have been identified as kind of areas that we want to support a little more. And so one is that, and there is special consideration given to these organizations if they kind of fall within these categories. So if an organization is working in rural, in rural areas, rural organizations, so special consideration is given to groups based outside of the Front Range. So not in Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, or Fort Collins, definitely like rural areas. And this has been a practice because we understand that a lot of resources are Denver centric, or folks might know about resources if they are in Denver, versus like rural communities that might not be able to travel and might not be able to access funders. And also recognizing that rural communities have different challenges when addressing the issues that they face down there or up there or wherever. So that's one area. Also community organizing. This one has really been historically something that Chinook supports, but I'll read the definition of community organizing, and this definition really comes from Chinook being embedded in the community for many, many years and really working with social justice organizations. So the definition of community organizing is the process of bringing affected people together to use their collective power to win improvements in their community and change the power structures to advance social justice. So again, you could see the 3 parts there of like, how are constituents, coming together? How are they building power together? And how are they making community change together? So that is also prioritized. 2 other areas that are prioritized are Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. And this came through recent work around our anti-oppression frameworks through the Giving Project. Trina mentioned this. Our Giving Project model has been in place since 2016, and we're part of a national network. And so in, I think, 2019, there was a lot of reflection, and thanks to the Black Lives Matter uprising. And so we have taken a position to support Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. And this does not mean that Chinook only funds these type, work areas or organizations that have this kind of issue area. But we are centering it internally and externally, based on the historic outcome of how the US and racism, enslavement and genocide of communities has happened. So we really wanted to center that. And so with Black liberation, those are just some examples of what the work can be, like ending the war on Black people, reparations, investment, divestment. And again, it really is how the organization really sees itself, like how do they define Black liberation? And the same goes for Indigenous sovereignty. Those are just some examples of what Indigenous sovereignty could mean. It could be preservance of tribal existence, protect tribal natural resources. Those are just some examples. Okay, great. Before we continue, are there any questions around our around our 4 priority areas? Oh, great. And thank you, Trina. You answered a question for Erica of if you have a fiscal sponsor, do you use their annual or ours? And it says the budget limit is based on the application that's applying, not the fiscal sponsor. That's great. Alrighty. So now we're gonna get into community organizing because we just want to be very clear on like kind of what we mean and the examples that might be helpful for folks to identify. So this is just one organization, Denver Justice Project, that does community organizing. They've done work founded by Alex Landau, who was a survivor of police brutality and went out to fund this organization and, you know, work on addressing police brutality at the, you know, city and state level, trying to prevent these abuses from happening. So the way that we see Chinook has this analysis around, you know, there's different ways that organizations come together to address the harms of injustice, right? Like they're all very, very important. But what we're, you know, prioritizing a lot is around community organizing. And the reason why is because there's a lot of research that shows that organizing like systems change work is really underfunded. A lot of money goes into a lot of direct service or education or other kind of human service supports, but community organizing is really underfunded. And to me, it really makes sense because, you know, that requires system change and the systems sometimes don't want to be changed. So that's why kind of Chinook has supported community organizing throughout, you know, many, many years right now. So we're going to get into like the definitions of what each of these are. And again, they're all very valuable. They're all really needed. But, you know, we want to highlight why there is some priorities around community organizing. And also before I get into this, you know, please reach out, you know, if you have questions around kind of how this all interplays. So again, I know you all are amazing and are helping me read, but I would love some more support because I don't want to hear myself speak this whole time. So if I could have another volunteer read this slide around services.
All right, Judith, I'll jump in. Supplying basic services to people who need them, often to meet basic needs such as food, healthcare, shelter, transportation, etc.
Can you read the next one as well? This is an example.
Sure. So the example is Women's Health Alternative is community-based health center. Women's Health Alternative provides birth control, free pregnancy tests, well woman care, and abortions. They also have a fund that offers financial support to people who can't pay for their services. Women's Health Alternative also offers financial support to people who have to travel from out of town for their abortion and need to stay in a hotel or pay for gas.
Great, thank you so much. So just to highlight again what we mean by, you know, direct services, again, with this example, we hope folks can see that it really is supporting the individual access, you know, reproductive rights, you know, through these various ways, birth control, even providing financial support in regards to, you know, some of the services. But again, it really is about supporting that individual with this, you know, need that they have. Again, very valuable work, but, you know, again, it is really addressing that immediate need for that individual. Any other volunteer? I would love it. Don't be shy. We'll have you read 2 slides, this one and the next one.
I can go again. Empowerment providing programs that focus on supporting positive identity development and self-esteem among marginalized groups. Example, Healthy You, Healthy Us is a youth program run by the county health department. They work in public schools teaching a 12-week comprehensive sex ed class. Students learn about safer sex, contraception options, sexuality, and healthy communication. Middle school and high school students are paired with student mentors who have graduated from the program already. HYHU also has an after-school program where students do service projects in the community.
Great. So this is categorized under empowerment because, like, as you could see, students are receiving a comprehensive sex ed that is really about empowering their voices and their choices around like sex ed. And they're paired up with a student mentor. And then they do a service project, right? At the end, in the community. And so again, a service project could be like, feeding the homeless or something like that. And that is again an example of like empowerment. Great. The next one, education advocacy. Can you read 2 slides, please?
Raising the visibility of a cause and advocating for one or against policies on behalf of the group affected by the problem to lawmakers, decision makers, media, and other stakeholders. Education and Advocacy Act for Reproductive Rights. As a state affiliate of a national organization dedicated to making abortion accessible to all. They fight anti-abortion laws and lobby to secure pro-choice policies across the state. They have created an annual policy report card and an Advo app to download to stay up to date on reproductive rights legislation coming down the pipe. But they have no people from the local community with intersecting identities in leadership positions in the organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rika. Yeah, like for example, I worked previous to this job in community organizing for about 10 years, and we work with a lot of policy organizations that are incredible allies to the work that grassroots organizations do, but a lot of times they don't have like actually constituency that is living that experience, right? That is living that oppression, and they might partner, they might create like reports, they might create, policy report cards, they might lobby at the Capitol, etc., but they really don't have leadership that is impacted by the issue. And they, again, their structure is not set up where, they really take a voice from those people directly impacted. And something that I forgot to mention, I'll go back really quickly around, around this empowerment that I forgot to mention is like, they're working with youth, but again, something that was not mentioned, right? Maybe in this application or like in this example was that where is the leadership of the youth, right? Like it doesn't mention that they helped, create the program. They say that they wanted this program or that they have advocacy or that there's like really engagement in their leadership and really decision making on like how they want to see changes in their school or etc. So again, that constituency led is also missing here in this empowerment. So that's kind of like important to know of as kind of the core criteria kind of interplays with some of these areas. So the last one is community organizing. Can I have our last volunteer for this one, please?
Sure, I can go. The process of bringing affected people together to use their collective power to win improvements in their community and change the power structure to advance social justice. Powerful Families is a women of color-led organization working for reproductive justice across the state. They are working for much more than abortion rights. They are also talking about access to abortions in rural areas, access to contraception, the right to have children, the ability to parent children with dignity, childcare, housing, etc. After conducting a series of listening sessions over the past year, Powerful Families created a community report. Now they're partnering with other groups from around the state to lobby at the Capitol about abortion access for people who don't qualify for Medicaid. such as undocumented immigrants, people who have been legal permanent residents for less than 5 years, etc.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. So again, with this example, again, you can really see a clear example of how, constituency lights are really centered here, right? It's a diverse group of people. They created a community report, so they're really listening to the community, what they want and need. They're partnering with other organizations, building power together, and really kind of addressing that intersectionality, right? It's like, what is reproductive rights have to do with like undocumented immigrants, or what does reproductive rights have to do with like access to housing? It's like, oh, well, actually, women can't really have safe pregnancies if they don't have adequate housing, if their housing has mold, if their housing has what have you, again, so that really intersectional analysis of how the issue is impacting community members. So again, we want to provide this framework, again, to just kind of just demonstrate that like these things are not like, they don't stand alone. We know organizations actually might do all 4 of these in their work, as they respond to the needs of the community, or sometimes, again, like I mentioned in the policy world, really organizations are like just focused in advocacy. They're not, empowering people. They're not, really building leadership of affected people. They're not providing direct resources, right? So again, for us, it's great if there's some of these in blue that is happening in the organization, but it would be really, really great if you like could highlight how is community organizing happening in your organization, right? Like, are you building power with the constituencies that are impacted? I think that is like the big question, like, how are you building power? How are people really being brought into the decision-making process? So again, it doesn't mean that this is all we focus on, but like, how do you connect maybe these things with community organizing? I will stop there and see if there's any questions around this framework before I continue. Okay, awesome. We'll continue. So some other additional components of community organizing is that they have a grassroots base of support. They have a strategic direction driven by a base. Again, ideally, the organization has clear demands around systems change. It doesn't have to be just in policy. I think that's also important to note that, like, again, we're not just supporting organizations that are doing lobbying at the Capitol or passing state laws. Like, there's different ways of doing systems change. A power map, again, like, kind of like who is the person in power that can, give that, again, kind of be moved so we can get some of these wins into our community, right? Sometimes we have to really gather our resources together to go up against, big institutions that, are oppressing our communities. So also leadership ladder, like if you have that, like how do you support the leadership as people progress? Because we know like maybe if folks start as a early volunteer, they're shy or they're still not understanding, well, they're like, don't know how the organization works, but like how, does a like senior volunteer really like, have power in that organization? So another thing around community organizing throughout the years here at Chinook, basically there's 2 kind of prongs from community organizing. One of around that is cultural organizing, and I'll read that quickly. It's cultural organizing integrates arts and cultures into organizing strategies. It's about organizing from a particular tradition, cultural identity, community of place, or worldview. And an example of that is an organization that's funded in the past is Al Frente de la Lucha. They have political and cultural education classes for their youth around Chicano and Mexican history. And, again, they really support that, cultural identity for their communities. And so they really focus on that. And then from there, they can go on into, doing some more advocacy work and also community organizing. So they've done like an iteration of those things. And again, we know we need the arts and really support that. And so also that cultural organizing is like if your work is in the arts, it's like, how is it really, again, supporting that systems change? How is it, you know, trying to, again, build for some of that long-term change that we're looking for. Another area that we see under community organizing is around healing justice, and that is how oppressed communities holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence, and how they innovate collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on their bodies, hearts, and minds. And so healing justice, I think, has been kind of like this framing that I think has been developing in the last like 15 years. And so I think that this one, again, is really, again, how our oppressed communities, like, you know, creating healing spaces for all of that injustice that they're facing. And again, one example is frontline farming. They were funded in the past, not anymore. But again, it's like, how do you think like farming, you know, is part of healing justice? So some of their analysis is like, you know, you need healthy soil, right? And people need access to healthy foods, but also recognizing that a lot of the, you know, ways that farming has happened is like they're rooted in, you know, Black and Brown traditions, and also recognizing the, you know, stolen, the exploited labor from enslaved Africans and the stealing of the land. So they really bring that entire analysis of injustice into their farming work. And, you know, as they grew, they actually have done advocacy and they have passed state policy now. But again, that took a while for them to, like, you know, build from there. But that's one example of how healing justice could look like. You know, we know that that could be a very, there's many examples of how perhaps the community is doing healing justice work. Great. So before we continue, I think we're getting into now the actual application in the grant online grant portal. So this would be a good time if you have questions around like our criteria and things like that.
You must be doing a very thorough job, Judith.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate you all sitting here and listening to me for all of these minutes. Okay, Trina, you can continue with this slide, please.
Sure. Yeah. So if you're just curious as to, you know, how does your organization compare to other organizations we've funded in the past? You know, we encourage you to visit our website, our grantees page, and you can see the list of and links to their websites of a lot of recent grantees over the past couple of years. And that will give you a good idea of the groups that we have funded in the past. And then you can see here, this is a list of, not a all-encompassing, but a wide list of different focus areas that our grantees have worked, you know, worked within. And so you can see it spans a lot of different areas. And that just gives you an example of the breadth of the different types of focus areas that we do fund.
Great. I can continue. Thanks, Trina. So here's a timeline of the application. Again, actually it's a 6-month process for us. And again, how Trina was explaining our giving project model, how we have regularly done that is a 6-month process because we recruit volunteers from the community. They go through some political consciousness training, they fundraise, and then they also do the grant making decision. They decide which applications have alignment with Chinook's core criteria. And so it's a 6-month process. It's an amazing commitment from the folks that participate in this program. And so that's why maybe I'm not sure how we compare to other foundations or community foundations, but this is our process. And so right now the grant application will be in February 15th is the grant application. Screening meetings. So the volunteers will start reviewing applications in April. Then site visits will happen probably like late April, early May. And then the final decisions will happen in June. And so again, it is you know, you apply and then you kind of wait, and I will be the one communicating updates as as it goes. Like we do have rounds of people, I'm sorry, organizations not being selected. So I will be the one calling and informing folks that, you know, their organization was not selected to move forward in the process. And also I think that one thing that I want to mention before I get into like the actual portal is that, because Chinook's Giving Project model is based on a community process, that fundraise together. You know, a lot of people that have participated come from actually, you know, wealth, and they're committed to redistributing some of that wealth. And so, but sometimes people come from different socio and economic, you know, backgrounds. It's a diverse group of people. So the amount fundraised, it fluctuates. So sometimes organizations won't be selected for funding. It could also be because of lack of funding. And unfortunately, you know, we want to see if we could like change our process one day to not like be in this kind of scarcity of like, oh, there's not enough funding. But unfortunately, that is our process right now where, you know, what the Giving Project fundraises is what is allocated. And so sometimes some tough decisions have to be made. Sometimes there is alignment with organizations, maybe not like very strongly, but there is still alignment. But unfortunately, people with organizations might not be selected because of limited funding as well. And so again, you know, we are very different from large and really, you know, even billion-dollar foundations that really have a lot in their coffers. You know, for us, we're really proud of this like community-led, you know, project that really sees that our communities are resources. You know, they're like resource mobilizers. They're connected to other people that want to give and that really believe in the grantees that we fund. And just so you all know, we on the regular cycles, we have an event called Meet the Changemakers, and that's where we like highlight some of our grantees to really show that amazing work that's happening in the community. But I think it's really important for me to be transparent about that because you know, sometimes organizations like, well, I felt like I was aligned. It's like, yeah, there could be some alignment, but unfortunately, sometimes hard decisions have to be made and organizations are not selected. Great. Any questions around that? Cool. So we will get into the kind of nuts and bolts about the application. This is the grant portal, and maybe Trina, if you don't mind helping me find the link in the agenda so we could drop it in the chat if folks want to visit it. So after this meeting, you're welcome to set up an account. If you think your organization has created an account in the past, you will need the email from the person that registered the account. Go ahead and create a new account if you're not sure. But please reach out if you might have an account. I can reset your password really easily. Great. So yeah, you'll be asked for organizational information, and also the profile will be attached to one person. So you can decide who you want that person to be. Do you want it to be the executive director who has the profile set up, or is it your grants manager? And I think it's important to know, you know, who you want that to be, because I will be communicating with the applicant unless you specify that I need to be communicating with the executive director. So you can make a decision on who you want the profile to be set, or you can set up 2 accounts and attach it to the same organization. So then from there, you create your password, you create your account, and your ID is your email address. And again, that's what I mentioned around like create a new account or reset it if you don't remember it, your password. So then there's an eligibility quiz, the 2 question quiz. It's asking, is your budget under 350? And also, are you based in Colorado unless you're an Indigenous organization? And we do this because we don't want people to start their application and then realize that they're not eligible. So there'll be a little quiz. Sometimes what happens there, the eligibility quiz will be funky. You might enter a wrong number and you're above budget, and it will like say that you did not pass the eligibility quiz. If you encounter any issues around the eligibility part, just email me and I will reset it for you. And I will also give you my cell phone number and you can text me as well. Just because we want to be responsive. So this is how the application covers. It's general inquiries, the narrative questions, a work plan. You can download these questions on this circle right here versus questions list. Like, for example, if you just want to print the PDF, if you want to discuss some of these things with your, colleagues, you can just print out those questions before you start, typing them in the system. The square with the house, that is the dashboard. You can always navigate there to see your profile. If you have like multiple applications, or, for grantees that are returning, that's where their reporting will show up as well. Great. So on the right top corner, you'll see who that profile is associated to. You can edit this information. For example, if there's like transition in your organization, you can edit that profile and change that information. And also you can come back and start the application and finish it at a later time. There's no problem with that. You just hit edit application. And also the system might log out after 90 minutes of inactivity. So make sure if there's an area that says save, hit the button save so you don't lose that work. So these are the application overview. The general inquiries will ask you about what's your mission. It will want to know if you have a fiscal sponsor or a 501c3, where you're located. Also, for funding questions, we would want to know what category you're applying for. So we'll get into that of, are you applying as a startup? Are you applying as established? Also we'll ask where the funds will be spent. Again, we just need brief answers with all of this. Again, if you could be concise, and just share the most important details, that would be great, in budget. Then the narrative, we'll get into that. We do want a 1-year work plan. And again, it doesn't have to be extremely detailed. We just want to see, January through December, some of the activities that you have planned. Again, it doesn't have to be extremely detailed. We just want to see some of the activities that you have planned for the year. For the financial information, we will get into that. Trina will be covering that. Leadership information, we do ask for a Word doc with 2 sentences of your board and staff. So we do want to know who is your executive director, a little bit about them, and ideally. We also have a diversity chart, and we'll get into why we request that. And then 3 reference checks for the site visit report, for the site visits. Here, you can add additional goals as you fill out the application. Again, please do not, don't feel like you have to just use all of the space. It's 2,000 characters. So again, we understand that applying can be very daunting and a lot of work. So again, if you feel whatever information you submitted really explains your organization, that's great.
Judith,
Yes.
there's a question.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, is it Darren?
Yeah, it's Darren. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question. A couple of slides ago, it had asked for leadership information, and I was curious for grassroots community organizing groups that don't plan to have become a C3, and curious about if we don't have a board with that, or paid staff. We don't plan to have paid staff members. We have working groups, but I'm just curious about, would it be okay for us just to put the information of everyone who's a part of our working groups?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that it would be great just to understand what is your leadership structure? How do you make decisions? And and understanding who are those people that are part of the decision-making process. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. And definitely, again, grassroots organizations might have very horizontal leadership, and it's just us understanding your structure and then getting a little bit of information of who makes up those leaders in your structure. Thank you for that question. Great. So we're gonna get into the narrative. So please don't feel overwhelmed. These are the narrative questions. Again, like I've been mentioning, feel free to answer them, as briefly as you feel comfortable to communicate your story. So again, we'll ask about history, the root cause, really understanding the root cause analysis of how you see the issue, right? And then you'll see the core criteria, lasting effect. Share how, how you do that work, constituency-led and community-wide. Then from there, the organizational structure and decision making, again, that really is getting to how is your constituencies, people impacted, having leadership and decision making in your community. How are you partnering with other organization? Fundraising strategies, again, this one is just to understand a little bit of are you looking for other funding and things like that. Again, that can be very, very brief. It's just more that we want organizations to apply to different, foundations so they can really have sustainable funding. And then just how you evaluate your processes, and then information of like when would be a good site visit. So that's the narrative application. From there are two ways that you can apply the kind of a type of grant, or sorry, the kind of funding. It's general operating or project support, and we really encourage people to apply for general operating. Again, you have discretion to use this money as you see is the best for your organization. For us, the application is just really seeing if there's alignment to the organization, So again, you have discretion with general operating to put those funds to use how you see fit. For project support, sometimes there are projects that, for example, the organization itself might not be like the strongest fit with our core criteria, but perhaps they're part of a project that does align more with our core criteria. So folks might want to apply for project support. So, and in that case, that fund would be restricted to just that project. It wouldn't be for just kind of general operating for the organization. So those are two options. We'll get into what we require for the budget. We'll ask when your fiscal year starts. Also, here's a startup versus established. So a startup is an organization that is has been in function for 4 years or less. And then established is an organization that has been active for more than 5 years. And so this actually, startup or established, is actually at your discretion. You can apply for either. Even if you are a startup, even if you've only been kind of working in, this organization's been functioning for 4 years, you can still apply for established. The only potential kind of like downfall around that is that if you are going to be kind of compared to other established organizations, that might impact, how it's, reviewed. Because established, they might want to see a little bit more progress in some of the core criteria. But again, we definitely don't stop folks from, selecting how they want to apply. And also once you select the category, you can't go back and change it. And another thing too is around like, you could be a startup, but perhaps you've been organizing for 15 years and you just started a new organization, but you really have a lot of experience. So there could be situations like that where an organization just applies for the established because they really have that, nonprofit management and that campaign experience to really launch their efforts. And then for 501c3, again, these are right now the statuses of organizations that we accept our applications from. And again, if you are looking for a fiscal sponsor, we may have some resources of organizations that support organizations and trying to find a fiscal sponsor. And here you'll see in the application that there's a sample work plan if you want to use that as an example, but feel free to upload whatever document that you might be using. All right, I think this is this you, Trina?
Yeah, I can take
right,
it from here. So there are a few financial reports that are required with your application. So the first two, the balance sheet and the income statement, those we want for as of the end of your last completed fiscal year. So if you're on a calendar January to December fiscal year, we'll want to see your balance sheet as of December 31st, and we'll want to see your income statement for the 2023 year. It just it depends on, what fiscal year you're on, but we want to have those two statements as of your last completed fiscal year. And then we also want your current operating budget for the current fiscal year. So again, if you're on a calendar fiscal year, then we'll want to see your 2024 budget, and we'll go into a little more detail on all three of those reports. If you're not, some organizations are very startup and aren't really familiar with the financial reports, and I'll help walk you through those. If you don't have your own financial statements, or you just would prefer to use our financial report form, which is very simple, very basic, you have the option to fill out our financial reports form, as opposed to providing your own documents. It's whichever is easiest and you prefer to do. Just want you to be aware that if your organization is selected to receive a site visit, then we will require a couple of additional financial reports at that time, which is likely to be, I think, in May, around May. All right, Judith, want to go to the next slide? So here first we have, and I apologize if anybody is very familiar with financial statements, and this is really basic information and repetitive, but I just want to make sure everybody understands what we mean by each of these statements. I will say that probably the financial reports are the attachments that we have to follow up most often with applicants about. So just want to make sure everybody understands what we're asking for. So the balance sheet is also known as the statement of financial position. It's as of a certain date, and it should be, as I said before, dated as of the end of your last fiscal year. It lists what you own, which is your assets, what you owe, which is your liabilities, and then the difference between the two, which is your net assets or your equity. The key thing about a balance sheet is that it has to balance. So that means that your assets should equal your liabilities plus your net assets. And as you can see here in the example, the total assets is 43,809, and total liabilities plus net assets also equal 43,809. Some of you who are, startup organizations, all volunteer led, you may not have a lot of a lot to report on your financial reports, and that's okay. Just show us what you do have. Next slide, Judith. So the income statement is also known as a profit and loss statement or a statement of operations, and it should cover your last completed fiscal year. So it should be 12 months of activity, unless your organization, does not have a full year under your belt. If you're very new, but it should cover the last completed fiscal year. And the ending date of your income statement should be the same date that your balance sheet is as of. So again, if you're on a calendar fiscal year, your balance sheet should be as of December 31st, and your income statement should be January through December 31st. So they should both end as of the same date. So it includes all of your money in, so all of your income or your revenue, and then how you spent that money, all of your expenses. And then the difference between the two will be your net income or your net loss if it's negative. And personally, I don't think that it's a horrible thing if you have a net loss on the year. That happens to, a lot of organizations, and a lot of times there, is money in the bank to start the year that helps cover that loss. So don't feel like if you have a net loss for the year that it's necessarily a bad thing or will be seen as a bad thing. All right, Judith, next slide. The other financial report that we require is your budget, and that should be for your current fiscal year. So if you're on a calendar fiscal year, it will be for 2024. And it's your best realistic estimate of the funding that you think you'll receive for this year, and what you plan to spend it on. It does not have to balance. Your income and your expenses do not have to, zero out. I think that's a very unrealistic picture. Very rarely I've never worked for an organization where everything's zeroed out at the end of the year. but we wouldn't want to see like you bringing in or expecting to bring in like $50,000 and spend $300,000, because that's not realistic. So this is just an example here of a budget, but there are, as many different budget formats as there are organizations. So don't feel like yours has to look like this. Just want to show an example of what a budget looks like. All right, next slide, Judith. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you don't have your own statements or budget already prepared, or if you just want to, fill in the numbers really easily, you can use our financial reports form that's provided in the application. It's an either or thing, so you don't have to do both. It's an either or. This is an Excel file, so you can edit as needed. We've put in some like general income and expense categories, but you can write over them, you can add lines, you can customize it to your organization. The top section here is kind of a replacement for the income statement and the budget. So the first column that says last fiscal year, that would be your income and your expenses for your last completed fiscal year, which would possibly be 2023 if you're on a calendar fiscal year. And then the last column is your budget for the current fiscal year. So again, just fill in your income and your expenses. You can customize it if needed. And then next slide, Judith. This is the bottom of the form, this cash on hand section. This kind of takes the place of a balance sheet, but it just basically all we ask you for is for your total cash balance as of your last fiscal year end, and then the most current month end that you have. Because of where we fall in the year, if somebody's on a calendar fiscal year, they're probably both going to be December 31st. But if you were on like Chinook Fund, we operate on a July to June fiscal year. So our last fiscal year end was June 30th of last year. So that's what I would fill in that first column, our cash balance as of that date, and then the most current month end would be either December 31st or January 31st. So I'm going to pause here. And does anybody have questions about what I just covered with the financial reports? I know financials can sometimes be confusing for people that aren't financial people. And again, I'm happy to answer questions offline. You'll get my email address, and feel free to email me with any questions that come up as you're completing your application. Let's see. I think that's it for me then, Judith.
Awesome. Thank you, Trina, so much for your help on this. Great. So just a couple more slides. Another thing that we're going to be asking for is a diversity chart, and this is how it looks like. And we actually do want organizations to add like the number of people. For example, if you are, and this one actually I'm just realizing it's a little outdated. The one that's in the application actually asks what the executive director, what their identity is. So it pulls it out. So you'll see under staff here, but then underneath there'll be another race category for the executive director. Just trying to understand the leadership, who it's led by and the identities around that. So please fill that out. And again, we do want like numbers. So it's like if there's 5 staff that identify as Latine, you can put that. Here are some of the categories that we have. Here are other areas where you can put other identities. And that's, again, if there's an issue area that you work on that is really important to your constituency. For example, if you're an organization that works with homeless people, like, maybe that's something that you want to track of, like, our staff, half of them, 5 people, have experienced homelessness in the past, or other kind of identities that are important for your work area. And so again, this is an example of like, we really want that number, not like 50%, not like a tally. It's really like the numbers. And the reason why we asked for a diversity chart is like, you know, like sometimes in the past, you know, again, it really comes down to the constituency led, like, are the people impacted by the issue, you know, showing up in the leadership on the board, and really trying to like see a little picture because of from the application. Great. So here's just a reminder of like the things that you will need to upload. So these are documents that you will need to provide. So a fiscal sponsorship agreement from your fiscal sponsor, a one-year work plan, that typed up leadership bios, and the diversity chart. And then the financials that Trina covered. And then again, here's just some resources that there is possibility to review your application. It would be me. I can review your application and ask questions, things like that. Or if you can, you know, have questions for me, I can help answer questions that you might have. You must submit the grant to the portal by the deadline. We do give a little extension of a couple of days, but it's just a couple of days from the actual final deadline. Yeah, and I will be following up with organizations that might have missing documents, more information that we need in order for your application to be considered complete and for it to move to the review phase. So basically that is it. Oh, sorry, there's a typo here. That should say February 15th of 2024, but that is when the grant deadline is due. Here is our contact information. You can email me and Trina if you have any questions. This Giving Project information is, again, if you're interested in learning about the Giving Project and that model, you can reach out to Barclay. But here is the portal. You can access it already. And then with that, if there's any questions, we were gonna end early, so it's great. But if you have any questions, we can answer those now. Awesome. Well, I just want to thank everyone for your time. Really appreciate you all. If you haven't learned about Chinook, you know, really excited that you joined us to get familiar with our community foundation and the work that we're doing. Feel free to like share our information with other organizations that you might see that are in alignment with our grant criteria. So with that, just saying thank you so much. Y'all have a nice evening. Please reach out to me. If you have any questions, I am here to support. Here to support.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody,
you.
for attending.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good day,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Care. Oh.